Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Book Mecca's special presentations. Every month, we meet with authors that are doing phenomenal work around the world when it comes to literary work, in the community, you name it. And today is no different. My name is Shaylin Scott, the founder of Book Mecca, which is your platform for all things Black lit, from literature to life to blending it all together. So we provide a space for all Black authors and all things Black lit. So today we have a very special guest. It is Kimberly Jones. And if that name sounds familiar, it's because she was here before for one of her books, young adult books before. So feel free to go back and watch that earlier episode. But today we're here to talk about her latest work, How We Can Win. And if you have not picked it up already, definitely do so. But before we get started on our chat today, I want to introduce Kimberly Jones. She's Kimberly Jones, an American author. She's a filmmaker. She's best known for a New York Times bestselling adult novel, I'm Not Dying With You Tonight. And she's known also for a viral video. You guys may, and I'll show you what it looks like as well, video on How Can We Win, which was published during the George Floyd protest. She has been a winner of a number of awards. She's been viral, of course, for that video as well, and so many other accolades. So I'll make sure everyone has the contact information, and feel free to read through her bio as well and follow her if you are not already doing so. So without further ado, I want to introduce Miss Kimberly Jones. Hello, hello.
Hello there. Thank you guys for having me back.
Oh, you are so welcome. And thank you for joining us again today. I know in the evenings it's always a little crazy, but we appreciate you taking the time out to talk about this great book and just the inspiration behind it and motivation. I will say, when I first read the book, I didn't know. I thought it was based on the viral video, and I was wondering where you were going with it. But as I read through it, this is so much more than what was in the video. This has solutions. This has ways and opportunities for you to think. So before we get diving deep down in, I want to go ahead and show the video to everybody if they have not already seen it. So I will try and be technology savvy today and share it. So we're going to see if this works. I tried to do it earlier, so we're going to see. Okay, here we go. All right. This is the viral video, How Can We Win?
So I've been seeing a lot of things talking of the people making commentary. Interestingly enough, the ones I've noticed that have been making the commentary are wealthy Black people making the commentary about we should not be rioting, we should not be looting, we should not be tearing up our own communities. And then there's been an argument of the other side of we should be hitting them in the pocket. We should be focusing on the blackout days where we don't spend money. But, I feel like we should do both. And I feel like I support both. And I'll tell you why I support both. I support both because when you have a civil unrest like this, there are three types of people in the streets. There are the protesters, there are the rioters, and there are the looters. The protesters are there because they actually care about what is happening in the community. They want to raise their voices, and they are there strictly to protest. You have the rioters who are angry, who are anarchists, who really just want to fuck shit up, and that's what they're going to do regardless. And then you have the looters. And the looters almost exclusively are just there to do that, to loot. Now, people are like, well, what did you gain? Well, what did you get from looting? I think that as long as we're focusing on the what, we're not focusing on the why. And that's my issue with that. As long as we're focusing on what they're doing, we're not focusing on why they're doing. And some people are like, well, those aren't people who are legitimately angry about what's happening. Those are people who just want to get stuff. Okay, well then let's go with that. Let's say that's what it is. Let's ask ourselves why in this country in 2020,
financial gap between poor blacks and the rest of the world is at such a distance that people feel like their only hope and only opportunity to get some of the things that we flaunt and flash in front of them all the time is to walk through a broken glass window and get it. That they are so hopeless that getting that.
If you could see, I did not quite do that right. So I want to try and do it again so it's not just showing it, because it's really good. I really want y'all to hear it. It's not too long, so I won't take up too much of our time. So I'm going to start it over if that's okay with you, Kimberly.
Sure.
Okay.
So I've been seeing a lot of things talking about people making commentary. Interestingly enough, the ones I've noticed that have been making the commentary are wealthy Black people, making the commentary about we should not be rioting, we should not be looting, we should not be tearing up our own communities. And then there's been an argument of the other side of we should be hitting them in the pocket. We should be focusing on the blackout days where we don't spend money. But, you know, I feel like we should do both. And I feel like I support both. And I'll tell you why I support both. I support both because when you have a civil unrest like this, there are three types of people in the streets. There are the protesters, there are the rioters, and there are the looters. The protesters are there because they actually care about what is happening in the community. They want to raise their voices, and they are there strictly to protest. You have the rioters who are angry, who are anarchists, who really just want to fuck shit up, and that's what they're going to do regardless. And then you have the looters. And the looters almost exclusively are just there to do that, to loot. Now, people are like, well, what did you gain? Well, what did you get from looting? I think that as long as we're focusing on the what, we're not focusing on the why. And that's my issue with that. As long as we're focusing on what they're doing, we're not focusing on why they're doing. And some people are like, well, those aren't people who are legitimately angry about what's happening. Those are people who just want to get stuff. Okay, well then, let's go with that. Let's say that's what it is. Let's ask ourselves why in this country in 2020, the financial gap between poor blacks and the rest of the world is at such a distance that people feel like their only hope and only opportunity to get some of the things that we flaunt and flash in front of them all the time is to walk through a broken glass window and get it. That they are so hopeless that getting that necklace, getting that TV, getting that change, getting that bed, getting that phone, whatever it is they're going to get, is that in that moment when the riots happen and if they present an opportunity of looting, that's their only opportunity to get it. We need to be questioning that why. Why are people that poor? Why are people that broke? Why are people that food insecure, that clothing insecure, that they feel like their only shot, that they are shooting their shot by walking through a broken glass window to get what they need? And then people want to talk about, well, there's plenty of people who pulled themselves up by their bootstraps and got it on their own. Why can't they do that? Let me explain to you something about economics in America. And I'm so glad that as a child, I got an opportunity to spend time at Push where they taught me this, is that we must never forget that economics was the reason that Black people were brought to this country. We came to do the agricultural work in the South and the textile work in the North. Do you understand that? That's what we came to do. We came to do the agricultural work in the South and the textile work in the North. Now, if I right now decided that I wanted to play Monopoly with you, and for 400 rounds of playing Monopoly, I didn't allow you to have any money, I didn't allow you to have anything on the board, I didn't allow for you to have anything. And then we played another 50 rounds of Monopoly, and everything that you gained and you earned while you were playing that round of Monopoly taken from you. That was Tulsa. That was Rosewood. Those are places where we built Black economic wealth, where we were self-sufficient, our stores, where we owned our property, and they burned them to the ground. So that's 450 years.
So for 400 rounds of Monopoly, you don't get to play at all. Not only do you not get to play, you have to play on the behalf of the person that you're playing against. You have to play and make money and earn wealth for them, and then you have to turn it over to them. So then for 50 years, you finally get a little bit and you're allowed to play. And every time that they don't like the way that you're playing, or that you're catching up, or that you're doing something to be self-sufficient, they burn your game. They burn your cards. They burn your Monopoly money. And then finally, at the release and the onset of that, they allow you to play and they say, okay, now you catch up. Now, at this point, the only way you're going to catch up in the game is if the person shares the wealth, correct? But what if every time you share the wealth, then there's psychological warfare against you to say, oh, you're an equal opportunity hire. So if I played 400 rounds of Monopoly with you and I had to play and give you every dime that I made, and then for 50 years, every time that I played, if you didn't like what I did, you got to burn it like they did in Tulsa and like they did in Rosewood, how can you win? How can you win? You can't win. The game is fixed. So when they say, why do you burn down the community? Why do you burn down your own neighborhood? It's not ours. We don't own anything. We don't own anything. Trevor Noah said it so beautifully last night. There's a social contract that we all have, that if you steal or if I steal, then the person who is the authority comes in and they fix the situation. But the person who fixes the situation is killing us. So the social contract is broken. And if the social contract is broken, why the fuck do I give a shit about burning the fucking Football Hall of Fame, about burning a fucking Target? You broke the contract when you killed us in the streets and didn't give a fuck. You broke the contract when for 400 years we played your game and built your wealth. You broke the contract when we built our wealth again on our own, by our bootstraps in Tulsa, and you dropped bombs on us. When we built it in Rosewood and you came in and you slaughtered us. You broke the contract, so fuck your Target. Fuck your Hall of Fame. As far as I'm concerned, they could burn this bitch to the ground. And it still wouldn't be enough. And they are lucky that what Black people are looking for is equality and not revenge.
As you can see, the passion, the fire that you saw in that video, that is all Kimberly Jones. You said it just throughout your work, you can feel it, you can see it in it. That video went so viral. It has been shared so many times on every platform, you name it, from celebrities viewing it and commenting on it. How did that video change, or how did it motivate you or inspire you to create this book?
Man, it's funny because after that, I'm tripping. I still get emotional myself when I have to listen to that, because when you think about the harm that has come to our people, and we've been so desensitized to it because it happens so much, and it happened in so many ways. I was teaching some kids at a school yesterday about how they used to actually use Black babies in Florida as gator bait.
Wow.
And so when you think about the amount of harm that has come to our people, I tell people all the time, I feel like that day when I was standing on that corner, that wasn't me. I didn't even remember everything that I said. I felt like the ancestors took over and I blacked out.
There you go.
And so I don't even think it was my message. I think it was the ancestors' message that they needed me to carry at that time. And so it has just motivated me to focus my energy on the liberation of my people. And what I recognize is that we always talking about fighting for equality. If it was one thing I could change about that speech, that day that I would, instead of saying they're lucky we're looking for um, equality and not revenge, I would have said equity and not revenge, because I
Yeah.
feel like we do a disservice to our ancestors by saying that we haven't achieved a certain level of equality. Like I get on a plane, I sit where I want to sit, I go in a restaurant, they have to serve me. I go into a hotel, they have to serve me. They can't prevent, if I can pay for a school, they can't prevent my child from being there. That's the work of Bayard Rustin. That's the work of Fannie Lou Hamer. That's the work of Dr. King, of John Lewis, of C.T. Vivian. Um, so I think we do a disservice to our ancestors by saying that they did not accomplish anything for equality. I think we also do a disservice to them by not understanding the tenacity that it
Mm.
took to do what they
Yes.
did. I mean, you got to keep in mind the bus boycott was 364 days of them walking until their feet were bloody so I could sit where I wanted to sit on a bus. And we can hardly turn off Sunday night football in solidarity with our brother Cap. And so I recognized that it was an onion and that it was multi-layered. And
Mm-hmm.
despite the fact that it woke the country up in 6 minutes, that they needed this over 400-year history lesson to understand the fullness of it. So
Mm.
basically, I feel like How We Can Win is my manifesto as to why they owe us reparations.
There you go.
And so if I realized what the impact that the video had, because it's been shared, over 10 million times worldwide, and I realized that it, was shocking to me when I realized that it didn't just have an American impact, that it had a global impact. I mean, GQ Germany made me
Similar.
their voice of the year, and then they built a 50-foot waltz in my honor in Ghent, Belgium, and all the
Wow.
black MPs in the UK called me and wanted to have Zoom calls with me for months and talk to me. So when I realized that it was having a global impact, I thought, wow, people are listening, and this is my opportunity to give them the real story, the full story. I had better use that gift that God gave me in my pen and tell them all the ways in
Mm.
which we have been marginalized. And so that's what inspired the book.
Kind of speaking to all of the impact that you made worldwide, and just hearing you kind of recite some of those activists and leaders before. How long have you been an activist or in this field, or have this history? You write about a lot of it in your upbringing and from
Mhm.
your mother. Was that something that was just ingrained in you from an early age? And is that across the board for your family? I know that's like three questions.
Yeah, no, it really is in some ways, not in the way in which my work has been presented, but in some ways it is across the family. I come from a long line of women ministers, which is,
Mm.
something of itself when you think about the times in which they would have been in ministry. My mother was a minister. My grandmother was a minister. My great grandmother was a minister. For 4 generations, the youngest girl in the family went into the ministry. So I'm the fourth youngest girl. So my ministry is not in a pulpit. I call myself a street prophet. And so, I grew up watching these phenomenal women, these dynamic women being able to use their oral gifts to have an impact on people.
Hmm.
And so, that lineage definitely comes from the women in my family. The other thing that I could say is sometimes when God just got a calling on your life, like the gems of it get
Lean
planted
in.
the whole way through, right?
Yeah.
So, when I was 8 years old, my babysitter, who I talk about in the book, Miss Deborah, who's still alive, and I went to go visit her last time I went home to Chicago. My babysitter was, she was a former Black Panther. She studied, um,
Wow.
she was right there with the Chicago Black Panthers. She was friends with Fred Hampton. You know what I mean? And so that's who babysit me. So when I'm like 8, 9 years old, I'm not watching TV at Miss Deborah's house when I'm going over there after school. She's playing Dick Gregory records for me, and
Wow.
she's talking to me about, she's talking to me about the bombings. I remember when the bombings in Move happened because she talked to me about it. She's reading to me Fred Hampton's manifesto. She's talking to me and teaching me the tenets of the Black Panther movement when I'm 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. And then my mother needed, some place for me to go after school. She sent me the after school program at Operation Push, Rainbow Coalition. I also
Mm,
went to after school program at DuSable Museum, which is one of the largest, at the time was one of the largest
mhm.
African American history museums. So this is where I'm going after school. And then I had a teacher, Miss Lumpkin, who realized that I had a gift for gab. I'm neurodivergent. I have ADHD. They basically tried to tell my mother that I was slow.
Mm.
And they wanted to put me in like learning disability classes. And my mother was like, I'm talking to this kid every day at home. I'm not going to let y'all put that label on my baby. Kim is not slow. Maybe y'all just don't know how to teach her.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a teacher who, although I hadn't been diagnosed with ADHD at the time, I learned later that that's what I had. I had a teacher who realized that I just had energy to burn. So if she got up, she let me get up and talk in front of the class. That once I got that out of my system, I could sit down and I could actually do the work. Well, Saturday mornings, my mother would, when she would go shopping, she would leave me at the Carter G. Woodson Library, which is the largest collection of African American books. So I would sit on Saturday mornings and read one book after another about Black history. So I would stand up in 7th and 8th grade in front of the class to burn energy in Miss Lumpkin's class, and I would teach Black history. I would teach them, I would teach them about
Oh my
Elizabeth Keys,
goodness.
and I would teach them about Frederick Douglass, and I would teach them about, Reconstruction, and I would teach
Mm-hmm.
them about the Freedmen's Bureau and the Freedmen's Bank, and I would teach them about IDB Wells and Mary McLeod Bethune and all of these people, and that's what she did to calm me. And when she realized I had a gift for it, she put me in oratory competitions, and I would win. And
Wow.
so it started my life. My high school, I went to 3 different high schools because I was a bad kid. Nobody knew what to do with me. I wouldn't behave. And when I got to my final high school, which was a predominantly white high school, I created our Black History Month. My
Mm.
uncles have been in the 761st Tank Battalion, the first all-black tank battalion, whose commanding officer was Jackie Robinson. They were basically to the ground what the Tuskegee Airmen were to the air. I brought the remaining members of the 761st into the school to speak. So
Wow.
this is what I was supposed to do.
Yes, for sure. That's such a rich history. I mean, I can't even imagine what that was like. You're constantly being poured into by living ancestors, right? Just surrounding you. That is amazing. So for those who are reading your book, and a lot of what you mentioned is in here, the Reconstruction and Reconstruction 2.0, definitely
Hmm.
read through all of it. For people who maybe didn't have that experience or they don't know, you give them a lot of history lessons and tips and things they can dig into and dig down in. But how do what kind of next steps would you say you want the community to do or to be motivated to do when they read something or they hear the messages that you speak?
I want them to recognize that they have their own power, and that
Mm,
that is the greatest trick that was ever played, was to convince us that we don't have power. That's a masterful trick,
yeah.
and it's been working on us for a long time,
Wow.
because they want us to be hopeless, because a hopeless man won't move.
Mm-hmm.
A hopeless man stands still. A hopeless man doesn't take things into, they just, I hear people say all the time, oh, I'm not gonna, I ain't worried about voting. I ain't gonna do this. I ain't gonna do that. I ain't gonna do that. Then people gonna do what they want to do anyway. Well, yeah, at the federal level they are. If I'm keeping it 100 with you, at the federal level, you have very little impact, because at the end of the day, at the federal level, poor people vote and rich people lobby. That's what it is.
Mm. Speak on it.
But at the local level, which is the elections that we don't show up for, we all show up in droves for the federal election where we have zero power. But at the local elections, you have power. Every state has its own constitution. You should understand the constitution of your state. I know the law here in Georgia. The law here in Georgia is you can enter the Georgia Capitol at any time that you like to. And as long as you stand in the rotunda and do not take the stairs up to where they have session, and as long as you do not make any noise or do anything to disrupt session, the moment session breaks and those state senators and state congressmen come down those stairs, the moment their feet hit the rotunda, you can grab them and say, hello, my name is Kimberly Latrice Jones. I'm in District 8. I'm in your district. I need to talk to you.
Wow.
I watched 6 teenage girls here in Georgia change a rape law with grassroots lobbying because one of them was raped on campus and they didn't like the turnout. And so they got petitions, they found friends, they found allies, they found a state rep that also had been raped that understood their plight, and they got her to write policy. And these 6 teenage girls got a rape law changed because they understood their power. The game is to teach you that you have no power, and then you won't move. We look at all the laws that have been happening around the country that we don't like, and we haven't been paying attention to the fact that these laws aren't being passed at the federal level. They're being passed at the state level. So you got to get savvy and understand the civics of your state. I know for a fact that these pieces of policy are being written by national PACs, and then they find a state senator or a state rep who will sponsor the bill, and it starts in a state, let's say for example in Virginia, and then they find a state rep or a state senator to sponsor that bill in that state. And if they can get it to pass there, then they find a state rep or a state senator in Georgia. They send that same bill over. That PAC finds another person to sponsor it, and they try to get that same bill passed. Well, each state has its own constitution. So that means if that PAC had that passed in Virginia and now they brought it to Georgia, you need to have organizations that have civil rights attorneys on deck that are willing to comb through that 300 to 500 page document and make sure that everything in it matches the constitution of that state, because the chances are really high that it hasn't, because it's basically been copied and pasted from another state that has a different constitution. And if there's anything in it that is illegal based on the constitution of your state, then you can try it in court and deem it unconstitutional. That bad voting bill that just got passed here in Georgia, people talked all about when it passed, but people didn't talk about the fact when sections of it were thrown out because it was deemed unconstitutional because it came from a PAC from another state and it didn't match. There were things in there that were illegal based on Georgia State Constitution. They don't teach you civics in school because they know that if you know this stuff, you will go to bat for yourself.
So what do you say to those who are thinking, it's just me? I'm just one person. What can my one voice do? Even if I know all of those things, what can I do in my own community?
I would say there's a brother named Yusef. If you look up Yusef video that went viral in Syracuse, New York, he's one of my homeboys. He's one of my frontline brothers. Look at what Yusef did. Yusef got his charts, his data, all of his stuff together, went to a city council meeting, stood there one man alone by himself, and got them to defund the police of Syracuse by himself. I'm telling you, your power is in your state, your county. It is not federal. You barking at the air when you're trying to talk about, well, Biden needs to do this. Man, I don't pay attention to federal politics at all. It has no value to me whatsoever. And the thing about it is, we learned from Reaganomics that the trickle effect does not work. The trickle down effect does not work. And we want to get mad at the GOP, but the GOP is savvy and they get that. They understand that you got to gut this thing from the ground up.
Just listening to you speak, I could listen to you speak all the time. I can tell that this is definitely your superpower for sure. Speaking, you had mentioned within the book that when the video had came out and even afterwards, you were afraid or a little hesitant about it coming out by the backlash that may be there. Are you still receiving backlash, or do you constantly get any pushback from just the way that you speak or what you speak about?
Oh yeah, I get pushback all the time. I get death threats all the time. I get phone calls from government entities all the time telling me not to go to certain events because they have intel that says there's been a sniper
Wow.
set there to get me. And at the end of the day, when you make this decision, you make the decision that if you lose your life, that's the cost. That's the cost. But I'm not going to let that run me into fear and silence me. Because again, that's what they will want. Half of the time, I think half of the threats that I get aren't even real. I think it's just done to try to like scare me. I remember when we were protesting in Louisville, Kentucky, around the time after the death of Breonna Taylor. My organization, the People's Uprising, we took a good trouble tour, and we stopped and protested for a brother in Chattanooga, and then we rode down to Louisville and protested down there. And there was all these threats that they said of things people wanted to do to us when we got there. So we had, we hired all of this armed security to ride with us, and nothing happened. I think people made the threats hoping that we just wouldn't come.
Wow.
And so I can't let that kind of stuff, deter me. And you got to keep in mind, if you're a 14-year-old kid talking about Black liberation in 1990, man, my skin got tough then.
Oh, I bet.
Because, people were like, she's a nerd, she's a weirdo, don't invite her, she gonna start talking all that Black stuff, I don't want to hear that.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, so it's like my skin. I mean, and I'm the baby of 7 kids. You can't be the baby of 7 kids and not have tough skin. I got 4 older brothers. You know what I mean? I got a
Wow.
bunch of big cousins. Like, yeah, my skin is tough. It's Teflon. Like, I'm not worried about that anymore. The only reason I was even worried when the video initially came out, honestly, wasn't even really for me. It was for Geely, my writing partner, because she was so attached to me at the time. Everything that we were writing, even though we were getting threats, and because we were writing social justice work, I was just like, I felt like, man, if I want to blow up my writing career, because I didn't know if I was going to get canceled or what was going to
Yeah.
happen behind that video. I was like, if I want to blow up my career, that's one thing, but God, dog, Geely is completely attached to me. There's no way they can cancel me and not cancel her.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's fair to her. So I called her the night before the video went out, and I said, look, sis, I did a thing. I said some things, and I'm about to send you the video. And if there's backlash that happens, I want you to know that I love you, but I'm okay with you separating yourself from me. Like, I'm okay with you walking away and being like, I don't agree with her, and, we have differences and we're no longer working together. I'm like, I will not love you any less. I'm telling you, if it goes bad, that's what I want you to do. I want you to walk away from me. I want you to publicly denounce me. And so I sent her the video, and she called me 20 minutes later. And I was like, the video only 6 minutes. Well, it took her 20 minutes. She said,
She is
sis, I just sat
processed.
there. Yeah, she was like, sis, I just watched it like 5 times in a row.
Yeah.
And she said, all of that you told me on the phone, she was like, man, squash that. She was like, I'm with you. If we go down together.
Wow.
So, I got a rider on my team.
That's there's a part in the book you call yourself well, you say a hood girl can be a hero too.
Yeah.
That right there, I was thinking, without even knowing what neighborhood you're from, what your background is, you are giving a voice to the voiceless through your work. And when you're go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask you, a part of the book you had mentioned that it was important for Gen X to show up.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
A few days before I recorded that video, me and one of my best friends, Brandy, and she's the girl that you see in the video that I walk over to at the end who hugs me. She and I have been in the street. She and I have been in the streets protesting for like a week by the time that video came out. Like, from like sun up to sundown, we were in the streets. And what I recognized was that, like, we was the only like aunties out there. It was a lot of young people. And I remember this boy like picked up a brick one night. We was out there at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and helicopters were surrounding us, and the National Guard was surrounding us. And this young kid, he picked up a brick and he was getting ready to throw it, and I could see the National Guard coming in our direction, right? And so I just grabbed his hand and I was like, please don't do that, baby. Did you see the National Guard right there? Put the brick down. And I'm auntie's age. I'm auntie age. You know what I mean? And so no kid's gonna throw a brick if auntie tells them to put it down. No kid's gonna bust through a window if uncle tells them don't do it. No
Yeah.
kid's gonna risk it all and go to jail if auntie or uncle, if OG, or as the kids say,
That
unc,
village.
auntie,
Yeah.
whatever, is out there. And I realized it wasn't enough of us out there because that young rage, I love it, but it needed guidance.
Mm,
And there wasn't
that's
enough of us
deep.
out there with them to offer guidance. And I could imagine a 19-year-old Kim being out there very differently than a 40-something-year-old Kim. Man, I probably would have been kicking in windows and doing all of that stuff too, you
Uh-huh.
know? And so this is why I represent myself authentically as I am, and I don't code switch and I don't change the way I speak. And even when that video came out, yeah, it was a whole lot of bourgeois black folks who was making commentary on my hair, the fact that I have long nails, the
Mm,
fact that I curse, all of that kind of stuff. I mean, people would type me things like, I think you're brilliant, but I think the fact that you wear all of them long ghetto nails takes away from your intelligence and all of this. And what I wanted them to recognize is that they were agents of the white supremacist delusion,
mm. Speak.
because the etymology of American English is most influenced by black slang. If you ever stood up in front of a crowd and said, put your hands together, if you think about that in terms of sentence structure, it's not proper sentence structure because it's slang. It comes out of the 1920s jazz scene. I bet you
Mm,
all these housewives on all these TV shows that are white, that are running around talking about they got new bling, I bet you they don't know that that etymology was created from a Little Wayne song saying bling bling. And so, what I wanted people to recognize is that black women, especially hood black women, trans black women, are the architects of cool.
there you
We
go.
teach everybody how to dress, how to say, how to be, how to build your body, everything. And then as we're inventing it, they're telling us it's less than. And then you look up 5 years later, when it's stuff that ain't even cool for us anymore, they monetize it and leave us in poverty.
There you. Ooh, you answered the question before I even could answer. Wow. You mentioned throughout the book that AAVE. And for those
Mhm.
that don't know, what is AAVE?
AAVE is African American Vernacular English. When we were growing up, they might have said Ebonics.
Mm-hmm.
It's the way that we speak. But they also don't recognize that part of our cadence comes from our West African heritage, the way in which we formulate words and language and things like that. And when you put a bunch of people together from all over the continent, and we have to start creating our own language, we created our own language, and it's beautiful. And I want us to stop being like, I want us to stop acting like it's remedial when it's cultural.
There you go.
And so, again, at the time in which we invent this cool heap language, all the way down to saying cool comes from us, we keep letting people tell us that it's less than. We even act as agents of white supremacy ourselves and tell each other it's less than, and then they monetize it.
Mm,
This is an economics game. People get mad when I say this because they're too emotionally attached to their feelings and not heady, because this is a head fight, not a heart fight, attached to being authentic and real in a way that is going to push the envelope forward. Even slavery was an economic decision. People haven't figured out yet all of this shit is about money.
yes.
So
That's
yeah, if I beat you down and if I groom you to where you'll beat down your own people for doing something that's dope, then this is when people got mad at Kanye. This is what Kanye was talking about when he said the culture, what culture? We're broke. That's what he was trying to say. We have let everyone convince us that everything about us is less than, and then everyone capitalizes on it. And let me tell you,
mm,
Black death, Black culture, Black clothing, Black language is a multi-billion-dollar industry that we are getting pennies. Even those of us who are wealthy are not getting any of it. If Shaq is rich, the person who owns the Lakers is wealthy, and there's a
yeah.
difference.
Ooh, speak on it. Yes. Wow. You said a word right there. And that the thoughts behind that and the first thing that I'm thinking of is, okay, all of this is true. All of this history is true. Where I am and where my family is, and everyone has someone in the family that experienced some form of Tulsa, something being taken away, some form of something being changed. So, what does that next step look like for the community? What does the Reconstruction 2.0 look like for the community?
We have to recognize that it's systemic, right? So when people say there's no such thing as systemic racism,
I hate that.
ooh, that one makes me real hot. That one gets me real hot. That's why they won't have me back on Fox News, because somebody said that one time when I was on Fox News,
They
and I was
let
like,
you on Fox News?
oh yeah, but not anymore. I was on there once, and then they were like, never again, never again, because when we talk about racism and that it's systemic, if it's a systemic problem, it has to have a systemic solution.
Mhm.
For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if we have a systemic problem, we need a systemic solution. So I think that we should recreate the Freedmen's Bureau, which never got an opportunity to do what it was supposed to do. And I think we're owed a recreation of it. And I think that it should impact every form of disparagement that they have ever given us. But I think the first thing we're going to have to do in order to even get close to that is attack the education system.
Oh, yeah.
Because as for, I'm paraphrasing here, but Frederick Douglass said, I'd rather raise smart children than try to change broken men.
Mm.
So the reason why there's this whole conversation about CRT, which is hilarious to me because CRT isn't even taught in schools, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, that is.
CRT has never been taught K through 12. It's only been taught at the college level, and it's barely taught there. And the reason why people don't understand that is because they're arguing about something that they don't know actually what it is. They think
And they
CRT
don't even
is
look it up.
Black history. Yeah, they think it's Black history when actually it's an actual quantifiable theory that focuses on showcasing how a system, primarily a legal system, can have a different impact on a group of people based on race. You went to school, I went to school, I wasn't taught that. That is not taught in
Mhm.
schools.
Mm-mm.
But what they did was they tricked everybody into thinking that it was taught in school so they could pass all these laws, again, at the state level.
Yeah.
Like I was saying earlier, none of these laws have been passed federally. These laws have all been passed at the state level. We paying attention. They did all of that and was a backdoor way to erase the little bit of Black history that's already taught. But anyway, what we need to do is recreate the Freedmen's Bureau. But I think the only way that we're going to do that is if people either read my book or books
Yes.
like mine and recognize all the ways in which they have an advantage that we have not. I mean, these people don't know that between 1926 and 1966, the U.S. government underwrote $200 billion in home lending, and
Ooh,
98% of that went to white America. They don't know that we spend
that's a
$200 billion
conversation in
more.
itself.
Yeah, they don't know that we spend $200 billion or more every year annually educating white children than we do all children of color combined.
Mm.
They don't recognize that the reason why our grandmothers and our grandfathers didn't trust the bank, and you didn't understand why Nana and Papa put their money in the mattress because of the Freedmen's Bank, which was the only bank that we were able to bank at, and white men handled the bank, and we did not have the federal protections that other banks have. And that
Mm.
generation lost to the tune of what would be translated now is $68 million of generational wealth wiped out. There's a section in my book where I list all of the atrocities, not even all, I list the atrocities that I could find that were
Hmm.
similar to Tulsa. And we hear about Tulsa and Rosewood, but there were so many that when I started writing the chapter, I realized I couldn't write a chapter about it. So I chose to just make a list of them in the back of the book because it was
Ooh,
too
yeah.
much to write about each one. So I just made a list. People don't know when they're visiting Central Park that Central
Mm.
Park in New York used to be a Black Mecca called Seneca Village, and they used eminent domain to make all of those people lose their homes and go into homelessness, and they built the park. So if
Wow.
you don't know all of this, it's incapable of you to nurture the empathy necessary to vote on a bill of reparations. And we think that it all happened in like 1800, and it's been going on. Don't get me. They wanted to know why Black
True.
people were skittish about getting the vaccine, but they didn't realize that there are still people living that were
Yes.
victims of Miss Evers' boys with the Tuskegee experiment.
Mm-hmm.
They think the last time they bombed a thriving Black community was Tulsa when they bombed the people in Move in Philadelphia in 1985. I was 9 years old in 1985. This
Wow.
is in our lifetime. And that they put the leaders of Move in jail, and they were in jail for 40 years. One of them died in prison. Two of them, my dear friend Mike Africa's dad and his mother and father, just got out of jail 2 years ago.
Mm.
Mumia Abu Jamal, who they framed because he was a journalist who wrote positively about the members of jail, about the members of Move, is sitting in jail framed right now. Probably gonna die in there. A political prisoner. And I'm just scratching the surface on what I wrote in the book, and my book
Yes.
just scratches the surface on what is actually has happened. I didn't write about the fact that they used Black babies as gator bait. I didn't get an opportunity to talk about the reason why they changed the law so that your mother is your lineage instead of your father, because Elizabeth Keys went to court as a slave, read books, figured out the law, and then freed herself. And she was able to free herself based on the fact that she had a white British father who had raped her mother during slavery. And then they realized that all types of Black slave babies were going to be able to do that. So they changed the whole law to make your lineage connected to your mother to keep people from doing that. And I bet you a lot of people don't know that story of Elizabeth Keys, which is funny
No.
because we're watching a court session right now of her great 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 grandson Johnny Depp.
Wow. Wow.
This is why they
Full
don't want you to
circle.
learn history. This is why I wake up every morning, and before I do anything, I spend an hour studying our history, because if people like me don't teach us, how will we know? They've hidden it for so long. And I tell you, what's just as bad as the miseducation of the Black kid is the miseducation of the white kid, of the American kid, of the Latin kid, of the Asian kid, because the fact that we keep this information from them means that we have not set up a system in which could nurture the empathy necessary in them in
Mm.
order to vote with us to free us of the shackles that we're still stuck in.
Wow. I can only imagine, because you're a mom, what it's like growing up with that kind of education. How do you instill that into your son? How do you put all that knowledge or all that fire and energy and upbringing? How do you do that? Or where do you
Man,
start?
my son's revolutionary.
Oh, I bet.
At 16, my son's revolutionary at 16. My son has been quite the thorn in the side of his school, because what I have taught him more than anything is that he doesn't make anybody make him feel small,
Mm,
that
hmm.
he is big by design. Since my child was a month old, his name is Drake. I make everybody call him Drake the Great. I make him
Wow.
walk in his light, because what we don't realize, again, in the history that has been lost, the oral history that has been lost, the
Hmm.
reason why we do things like call kids bad, still rooted in slavery. I'm gonna
Yes.
have to run, but I want to leave you with this. It's a joke I like to tell.
Okay.
It's a little girl standing in the kitchen with her mom, and she looks up at her mom, and her mom's making a roast, and her mom cuts the ends off, both ends of the roast. And she says, "Mommy, why you cut the both ends off the roast?" And the mama says, "I don't know. Maybe it makes it juicier or something. I don't know. Your grandmother used to do it. Let me call her and see why she did it." She calls the grandmother. "Mama, my daughter just asked me why we cut the both ends off the roast before we put it in the oven." And the grandma goes, "Child, I don't know. Maybe it makes it the flavor stick or something. I don't know. My mother used to do it.
Mhm.
Let me call down to the nursing home and ask your grandmother why she used to do it." So then the grandmother calls the great grandmother and she says, Mommy, my daughter just asked me because her daughter just asked her, why we cut the ends off the roast before we put it in the pan? Does it do something for it? Does it make the seasoning stick in or whatever? And the great grandmother in the nursing home goes, No, baby, that pan your granddaddy bought me was too short, and I had to cut both of the ends off the roast in order to put it in the oven.
Wow.
The the bruises of what we have been through, we carry it down from generation to generation to generation, and we don't even know why.
Mm.
Every black person that's on this call can probably tell you at some point they remember going in a store with their mother and their mother saying, Don't touch nothing, don't ask for nothing, you ain't
Yes.
getting nothing.
Yes.
And we
Yes.
think that it's because of store etiquette, but
No.
actually it's because of the Jim Crow South, where if your child walked in a store and broke something you couldn't pay for, it could result in your husband being hung that night. And so you had no room for error with your child,
Mm.
which means that you couldn't be soft as a mother with your child. You couldn't live in your divine feminine. You couldn't live in your nurture. You had to grab that child by their arm and squeeze them and say, when we walk in this store, don't you touch nothing. Don't you ask for nothing. Don't you reach for nothing. For your survival, Black people are still not thriving. We're still in survival mode. You
Ooh.
still teach your kids to get a bag when they leave out of store so nobody will accuse them of stealing.
Yeah.
When do we get to live and not survive? I tell people all the time, I'm not rooting for Black excellence. Forget Black excellence. That's too much pressure. The people who are excellent, the LeBrons, the Oprahs,
Mm-hmm.
the all of them, they're going to be excellent no matter what. I'm fighting for Black mediocrity. A mediocre white man can still make 7 figures and be
And
able to take
fail.
care of his family.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we have to be superheroes to do more than just survive? It's not right.
Ooh. Yes.
So that's why I wrote How We Can Win. That's why I tried to educate my people on race, history, and the money game that's rigged, because I wanted to empower them to know that we have the tools that we need at our ready to fight. All we have to do is know where to take the fight.
Ooh. And y'all see why you should read this book. You definitely, this is the book if you guys did not see it already. How We Can Win. Get the book, read through it, make your 52,000 notes like I have all mine in here. Absorb the book. That's the best way I can describe it. Absorb it and live in it. I want to thank you so much, Kimberly, for joining tonight. This has been fabulous. I don't even know what to say. And normally I am not speechless, but you have definitely left me speechless. And I am so motivated and inspired by your work. You even mentioned in it, talked about a glorious peacock. The beauty, the voice, the just strength. That is so much you. And I really appreciate you joining us. This has been amazing.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I want to let everyone know that you can follow her at her page. You can go to her website. Now make sure it's all on here for everyone to see. So you can see that. KimJonesWrites.com. Go to her page. You can purchase her books. You can find out more information about her bio. You can follow her, like her, share, all of that. I tell you, if you don't have the book, grab it today. So I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. This has been fabulous. And I will see you all next month. Bye.
Bye-bye.